think we're getting to a place where you can jump in day one and start being more successful than starting from scratch. I think if we think the most awesome thing about the cloud is the API, the most dangerous thing about the cloud is the API. Not just from, I don't know what I'm doing, but if you think about a skilled threat actor stumbles upon some privileged credentials, they can do a lot of damage in a short amount of time.
Welcome to another episode of Cloud Security Podcast. We are talking to Will today, who's a return guest. Thanks for coming into the show, man.
Thanks for having me back.
Well, I'm super excited. It took a while for this to happen, but I'm so glad this happened as well.
No, this is great. I'm glad timing worked out.
Yeah, I'm so happy as well. For people who may not have heard your first episode, could you give us a brief intro about yourself, your professional journey, where you are these days?
Will Bengtson. Today, I'm the Vice President of Security Operations, or Engineering and Operations at HashiCorp.
Okay.
And I started my journey a while back now. Long ago, started as a software person, found my way to security, wanting to break things, got really deep into cloud, and that's where I think we originally met was when I was doing a lot of cloud security work at Netflix. And during that time, I was always figuring out, I was really focused on detection, and I really found a love for it, and that's what eventually led me to HashiCorp. Started at the detection engineering side, building out that. And at this point, I've touched a lot of industries. I love cloud, and I feel like I don't know. I love the blue team side of security. More so than the old school penetration testing and red team that I used to do. Because I just find it's so much more. And that's what's led me to really being in my role today at HashiCorp, owning security engineering.
Awesome. And you had a stint in Capital One briefly as well.
Yeah, brief stint at Capital One, which was awesome. Great experience. Got me back to my home state of Texas, which I love and thankful for. Met a lot of great people. Worked with Houston Hopkins.
Oh, nice.
And really just... it was a great time. Very brief stint, but don't regret it one bit.
Cool. And I'm so glad because you have on the offensive side and you want to move on to the blue team side. At least top of mind for us here, Cloud Security Podcast has been incident response, at least for 2024. And I believe it will continue in 2025 as well. And you've been in the space for a while as well. What was incident response in the beginning when you started in that cloud space? And what is it now? How would you describe that to people?
I think in the beginning, people didn't really know, right? What they were moving into the cloud expecting to have the exact same thing that they had with on-prem or data center, and realizing rather quickly that, crap, where are my network logs, right? NSM was not a thing. And I think that was the biggest surprise to a lot of folks. Misconfigurations, not secure by default. Those were all the problems that people were running into. And from an incident response and detection standpoint, having to adapt really fast, right? And it's very similar to bringing an application from on-prem into the cloud. Lift and shift can work, but it's not the recommended approach, right? And I think it's very similar when you think about threat detection response. You can lift and shift processes, but you've got to learn and you've got to adapt and you've got to start figuring out the cloud native or hybrid solution for that. And that's where I think early on, we were stumbling, trying to figure it out, trying to understand what do these logs mean? What is actually logged or not? Why, when I click this button, did these other 8 calls get made, right? And I think we're even still trying to solve some of those problems. But I think early on, that's where it was. If you think about way back in the day, first AWS, everyone was using root credentials, right? And if you wanted to deploy an application and have the credentials be able to call APIs, you're putting your root creds on every box. It's the same credential everywhere. And then finally, IAM service comes, STS. And same thing, right? This has evolved and now it operates this way. Now we need to change our thinking and how we do this detection where we used to do it, right?
I love the 8 service example as well because traditionally incident response was there's either an application log or a system log you're looking at. You're never looking at events.
Right.
Whereas I still remember the first time I came out, what do you mean? So I think someone said, cloud is an event-based architecture. What does that mean? And I'm like, I'm trying to figure out, but then you look at your auditing service like CloudTrail and everything, so every click that I do is an event triggering. And the whole concept was like, oh, wow, there's like a event that I'm tracking. I'm not tracking logs anymore. I'm tracking an event, and that's where the detection response. For me, that was the most fascinating part that, wait, so it's not just about me looking through logs for making a query of some sort in my theme. It's more about now, what's an event being triggered? Can I pick the event up as it happens? So it never even makes it to the scene?
Right.
And then is that a good thing or is it a bad thing? Because if I put that in my cloud service provider, how do I validate it's still running?
Right.
Yeah, and I'm like, there were so many questions unanswered. And I'm glad you pulled the 8 service example as well. For one click, there's 8 things that are happening, figuring out what are these 8
Is
things.
that normal? Especially if you think about, to your point, is it still logging?
Yeah.
What is normal, right?
Yeah.
Should I be receiving more volume of traffic or of logs today
That's
than
right.
yesterday? Yeah, it's fun. And people, I think, similarly to everything else, folks are trying to figure out how to abuse the system or abuse the gap in thought, right? It's like, oh, I've enabled CloudTrail. Didn't realize that you could actually filter CloudTrail as well. And someone went in here and just filtered out all the logs, right?
Yeah.
Well, from a CSPM perspective, I still see that CloudTrail is enabled, but is it actually logging it? What is it configured to log anymore? Right?
I'm still getting logs. I guess that's everything, right? Like I'm not missing my data events. We can go into detail of this as well. So today, do you feel there's a lot more maturity in incident response? I guess maybe to set the scene, what we were saying, the whole concept of event-based architecture and doing threat detection event-based was like a whole another, I guess it wasn't even like a thing. People did not even realize that's what was going on to transition from on-premise to cloud. Today, when there's a lot more of, is there a lot more awareness on incident response in cloud to be different?
I think we're getting more and more.
Okay.
And that's why Rich and I set out on this journey long ago, right?
Yeah.
To try to bring that awareness, get more people hands-on training, really try to level up and bring the same processes that we used on-prem data center into the cloud, and just learn how to use the tools to our advantage. Right? I think when Rich teaches the class, he always relates incident response process with his time as a paramedic. Crisis management. It's all the same thing that we're doing. Just
rapid response, I think he calls it as well.
Yeah. It's just the target is different.
Yeah. You want to get to the problem as quickly as possible and find the quickest solution to stop the bleeding or whatever. I think he used the word he uses. And I love the analogy. I think because for context for people, so that's Rich Mogull. He's been on the episode before with Chris Franson. So definitely check out the episode as well. So to your point then, now that there is a bit more awareness, is there a lot more, I guess, tooling, and by tooling of native services that are different? Because we're talking about a time before when there was no security hub, no guard duty, none of that. We're trying to figure out what that world is. For context, for people who are thinking about 2025, I want to build an incident response practice for cloud. We've always noticed that it's not something people talk about a lot because there's a knowledge gap, and we'll cover that as well. In terms of someone building incident response capability in their organization today, are there native options available, or are we looking down the path of building something custom in a seam?
I think it depends on your model, right? Are you all in on AWS? Are you Azure and AWS? Azure GCP? What is it? So I'd say if you're in AWS, that's where guard duties come from, Security Hub, and that's where they're really trying to get you a place to start such that you can get the detections. You can surface them in a single place. I think AWS announced incident response service this week.
That's right, yeah.
And so now you can do case management and pull from experts if you don't have that expertise, right?
Yeah.
So I think we're getting to a place where you can jump in day one and start being more successful than starting from scratch, right? I think if we think 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you've got the base services and you're just trying to piece things together.
Yeah.
And you've got more and more companies offering cloud native solutions, and you're not having to try to adapt. All right, how do I use Splunk for this? How do I use Sumo for this? Right? How do I scale my service or the seam? Right? And then most importantly, it's when you're just getting started, where do I begin? What detections do I start with? And that's where leaning on some of the native solutions or some of the open source software can get you that 0 to 50, maybe not 0 to 100 kind of deal, but really transport you and get you started off on the right step.
For someone who's building the incident response capability today, there might be native capabilities in terms of what an example that really differentiates, and doesn't have to be a complicated example, to paint the picture for how different detection or what an incident looks like in cloud versus on-premise. Is there an example that is top of mind for you where people get that clear picture? Oh, on-premise, this used to be normal, but that maybe is not normal in cloud. The new normal in cloud is something else. Yeah,
I always like to use the example of server-side request forgery, right?
Yes.
I'm sure folks from AWS and other cloud providers are like, oh, not again. But I think it's a perfect example, right? If you think about the vulnerability as what it is, it's tricking a server to make a request on your behalf, right? If you think about data centers, old school, on-prem, getting an ability into the network, the real attack was like discovery of internal resources, potentially what ports are open. Maybe you had an API that didn't have authentication, so maybe they could leverage that.
Yeah.
In the cloud, it became such a more dangerous vulnerability because all of a sudden you got to pivot to the metadata service, which was unauthenticated originally, unprotected, right? And you could get credentials that were much more damaging than potentially the network discovery that you could have done in a traditional SSRF in a data center, right? So I think that's the biggest difference is some of these older vulnerabilities that might have been seen maybe mediums or something on the severity list, all of a sudden are high criticals now. And I think the biggest change in vulnerability and detection in the cloud compared to on-prem is how fast you have to move, how fast you have to discover, right? I've said it in previous talks that I've given. The most awesome thing about the cloud is the API. The most dangerous thing about the cloud is the API. Not just from, I don't know what I'm doing, but if you think about a skilled threat actor stumbles upon some privileged credentials, they can do a lot of damage in a short amount of time. And I think from what we're used to, when it comes to detection on-prem, you might be looking for things every hour.
IPS,
every
IDS,
24
all that.
hours, right? Cloud is forcing us to really decrease the mean time to detection and then also mean time to response. Because it's just, you've got to move, right? Because most likely, and I think where we're potentially maturing in incident response is there are a lot more breaches these days in the cloud than we've ever had. And it's partly because more people are operating in the cloud than ever. And maybe the SEC guidelines forcing people to disclose as well is raising it to everyone's attention. Mostly it's, by the time you've detected it, it's too late. You're switching into response mode. You're investigating, trying to figure out what happened, how did it happen, what did they take, and might not have been a thing in the past. But I think it's also really awesome from a cloud perspective. Similarly, you can do things like be very dynamic, move much faster, rotate your infrastructure to make it much harder on the traditional threat actors that are used to low and slow, kind of hide. They're going to have to move faster these days.
If someone's building an incident response capability today in the cloud space, that is a good example, the whole mean time to detection and response being faster. So if I'm thinking about setting up a program for incident response, and you've done one as you came into HashiCorp, what were some of the initial things people can look at, and probably some of the low-hanging fruits, or what are critical things that, tactical things people can go for in the beginning to get some wins? Because you have to show to everyone in the business that it's not like a lost cause, for lack of a better word. No.
At the basis, it's getting your processes together, right? Actually defining what does it mean to declare an incident? What are your severities? Who are the stakeholders you should involve? What's the process for communication? Are you offering a service to customers that you're going to have to notify them? I think first and foremost, until you get that solidified, anything with detection is what do you do when you detect it, right?
Or how do you even know if it's a high versus a low? Because I guess worthwhile calling out, even though you may already have an on-premise version of what that is, can I use that in cloud?
I think you can, right? I think it, especially if you're moving your business from on-prem into cloud, you've already defined potentially how many customers have to be impacted for it to be a medium or a high or critical. Is it one? Is it 100, 1,000? Is it anytime customer data is inadvertently accessed? Those kind of definitions, likely if you've been running on-prem, you can bring that right into the cloud, right? And then you can just transition, if you're building the detection program completely from scratch, not just from scratch in the cloud, then it's how do I document? What's the timeline? Do I have a template, right? What are the roles in the process? And those are, I think, key to the beginning. And then you can start building out, okay, what do we actually want to detect? And that's, I think, a lot of the problems is people that have started out, they don't know what to look at. And that's where I lean on vendors, lean on knowledge from expertise. Watch your podcast because people are talking about all the things that they care about. And that can give you some ideas. Threat detection, I think one of the unfortunate things is they want threat detection engineers to be able to write detections for everything. And unfortunately, it's a job where you have to be very collaborative, right? You need to go speak to your cloud security team and ask them, what do you worry about? They should be the ones that actually know more about the cloud and misconfigurations, or does this actually mean a bad thing or a good thing? Lean on your corporate security team as far as like third-party SaaS. How should this normally be used, right? And if you just lean on your detection engineering team to build out all the detections for the entire surface, you're just never going to get through that backlog. So you really have to build out that program, understand roles and responsibilities across the board, and push that out. And I think the same thing goes with response. Once you get a detection, is it the threat detection team or the response team that's always doing it? That's another level, right? Do you want to build a SOC? Are there multiple levels of the SOC? Or do you want to go SOC-less like we did at Netflix, right?
Oh, Netflix is a SOC. You didn't have a SOC.
When I was there, at least. I don't know how it is today. Alex, my Stradian team, we're really focused on, let's be SOC-less. Let's write a detection, and when there's a result, have some automated response, right? So Security Monkey back in the day,
oh, yeah, that's right,
tool,
the CME
right? Patrick Kelly had written some great things that when an S3 bucket was opened publicly, it just automatically went and removed the policy that made it public, right? And so that was one of the automated remediations, right? We really wanted to be able to, once again, move fast and not necessarily raise it to the on-call, wait for the other engineer to respond.
Come and validate,
but unfortunately, sometimes that's what you have to do, right? So like when, I'm sure we'll get into it as well, but when we run incidents, we're really command pulling in the right teams until it like, oh, we need to actually get into the log. But once again, like it's your application. The log's better than me.
Like, that's right.
Let me pair with you and go alongside and tell you the kind of things to look for. It's infeasible to think that everybody on your response side would be able to understand every log across your entire enterprise.
Have you figured out what's a good place to start? Because to your point, maybe one thing people should take away is that you cannot boil the ocean with the threat detection. You have to start somewhere. Have you found in the work that you were doing, what are some of the metrics you found are easier to create detection on, for lack of a better word, which is, because we haven't even spoken about the skill set required for this, because that's a whole another gamut as well. Let's just assume for the moment they know a bit of cloud. They're being asked to build detection for it. What do you think are easier tactical things people can start with so they feel, they get a feel for it before they suddenly just land in this world of 100,000 alerts and everything?
I was just about to say the first thing you don't do is turn on the hose. Right? Come up with that plan. But if you're just starting in detection in the cloud, some of the basic things I think is the root credential being used? Right?
Yeah.
I think things are coming that will eventually get away from that, right?
Yeah.
Where are our EC2 instance credentials being used?
Yeah. If we still have IMDS v1 being used anywhere, to your point, SSRF example, are we exploited by it or potentially?
Yeah, exactly. And even in CloudTrail today, you can tell whether a credential came from an IMDS v1.
Yeah.
So that's a great first step, right? And that leads to the proactiveness of preventing.
Yeah.
Because you're going to get tired of detecting and responding and say, hey, how do we change the patterns that we have? I think it's just the handful of things that people have yelled and screamed about. Those are a great place to start. And
like these days, no one just has one AWS account.
Right.
And people have thousands of AWS accounts. As we're talking about the tactical things we can approach, we spoke about root accounts, EC2 instances, IMDS v1. What does scaling look like across multiple accounts in terms of detection? Start with one account, multiply that across multiple accounts, or start at org? Is there some thought around that as well? More native, or should you just keep everything in a GitHub repository yourself?
From a log perspective, with CloudTrail, it's turn it on for the organization.
Yeah.
Right? And you're scaling automatically there, right?
Yeah.
If you're doing it account by account, then as you grow your accounts, go turn it on more.
Yeah.
Right? Make sure you centralize it. That used to be a thing before the organization CloudTrail feature existed. And so anything that you can do at the org level, I'm always recommending it. Turn that on.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised how many companies start with a single account, though. They're running dev in one VPC and prod in another.
Oh, wow.
I think it's when you get to SOC 2 from a compliance perspective that they start going, oh, we actually have to start separating these things out. But I think a lot of people tell some compelling stories of, no, we can actually maintain access to only the prod assets versus the dev.
Okay.
I've seen people do it, or at least try to do it.
Yeah, wow.
I don't recommend it.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But I think like what you're detecting in one, as you scale out, the types of detections that you can build differ. If you think about prod and dev in a single account versus prod and dev in two different accounts, you can start doing things by, is this alert coming from dev or prod? If it's from prod, maybe it's something critical.
Yeah.
If it's from dev, maybe we can wait till tomorrow, right? And so that's a trick from once again, don't turn the fire hose on, but I think preventing burnout is super important when starting down this journey of detection and response.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I worry about with just flipping guard duty on.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you might get a ton of noise, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And, Palantir did some really great public blogging about how they approach things back in the day, which we adopted at Netflix. I've brought that over to HashiCorp with an alerting and detection strategy of what are the things we want to alert on? What do we do when we alert on them? What logs told us about it? What is the false positive that could happen?
Yeah.
Is there a gap?
Yeah.
Or do I have full coverage with this one detection?
Yeah.
And most importantly, what do I do when it fires, right? What is that run book? So is it root access being used? Is it an AMI being shared publicly or shared outside of your account? How are we sharing resources in the cloud? One of the things that we like to think about when we do detections is you've got dev, prod, int, test, all the different environments. The last thing you want is a dev credential or dev access leading to production access. And so if you see an assume role and you're switching across account, if the originating ARN was a dev account, that's probably not something you want to see from a pattern.
Yeah.
It might not necessarily mean maliciousness.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's something you should detect just because it could lead to something long term. And so I think that's the scaling piece too, is it changes your mindset of what are the kind of things that I can detect that can talk about patterns, but also potentially could be malicious if someone's poking around. And you might think, oh, this dev environment's not that bad. It might be the thing that we're not going to page you and wake you up. We'll wait till the morning.
Yeah.
But if that leads to a pivot into production, maybe that's the detection that pages.
We enter this episode for a special message from this episode's sponsor, Vanta. Do you know the status of your compliance controls right now? Like right now? We know that real-time visibility is critical for security, but when it comes to our GRC programs, we rely on point-in-time checks. More than 9,000 companies have continuous visibility into their controls with Vanta. Vanta brings automation to evidence collection across over 350 frameworks like SOC 2 and ISO 27001. They also centralize key workflow like policies, access reviews, and reporting, and help you get security questionnaires done 5 times faster with AI. Now, that's the new way to GRC. Get started with vanta.com/cloud. That's VANT.com/CLOUD to get started. Now back to the episode.
And would you say, I guess that's the scaling in terms of maturity as well, as you mature your practice, to your point, you may start with the easy detections and perhaps you may look at the defaults that you're getting from guard duty, or you may purchase a third-party product or whatever. It gets to a point where people may start finding that actually that's not my entire list. That's not everything that I want to find, because I'll still get incidents which are being reported by other people. Is there a way for me to measure, hey, what could maturity look like at, I don't know, if I were to give 5 levels or whatever, what's level 1 in your mind that is an easy win, people can get to it and go, okay, at least you've covered your level 100.
Right.
Let's talk about level 200 is this. Have you got some thoughts on that as well in terms of maturity?
It's not something I thought about a ton, but I know folks on my team have.
Yeah.
And when I think about like level 100, the basics, it's some of the stuff that we've mentioned.
Yeah.
Are we collecting the logs? What logs are we collecting? Because I think that leads to maturity as well. And as to your point of scaling, as your teams and the cloud is maturing and cloud security is maturing, from a detection standpoint, you have to mature alongside.
Yeah.
And so are you collecting the right logs?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have detections being written? Are they working? And then do you have playbooks being written with something that when they actually fire? And so I think a base level would maybe be, we covered the really bad root credential usage. We have a playbook that exists for if that usage happens. And if it were to be a bad thing, like an incident and not a false positive or something expected, we have a process in place for what we do after. That process could just be pick up the phone and call FireEye or something, or Mandiant. And then evolve from there. Level 200 could be like, okay, we've got the basis covered. Now we want to be sharing AMIs outside of our accounts, not just public. So the public one's easy. Sharing them outside the accounts, now you need to know context of all your accounts.
Yeah.
And so from a maturity on the cloud side, do we actually have a full
visibility into?
Yeah. Do we have a metadata system that tells us these are all the accounts?
Yeah.
Are you sure? Did someone go just use their email and spin up an AWS account and all of a sudden hosting things?
Yeah.
Right?
Is there a spreadsheet floating around with all the account names?
Even if there is, do we have visibility into it? And is that being fed into the detection or with an alert? Is the analyst looking at that to go, yep, this is fine?
Yeah.
Right? And I think as you build more detections and as you grow and mature and as your applications move faster and faster in the cloud, that's what's going to continue to force the maturity in detection and response. Okay. Because if you think about anytime an AMI is shared, right, that's not, or shared not publicly, but to another account, fire that alert and put it in the queue. If you get to maturity and you start building AMIs, sharing them across account from through a dev, int, prod perspective, those alerts are going to grow.
Yeah.
And so as analysts going to go check everyone, and then you're going to end up in a situation where it's, let me just clear out my backlog.
Yeah.
And then you actually miss that signal.
Yeah.
Right? So that's how I think about it is log coverage, types of detection.
Yeah.
Are we covering the basics? Are we responding
well
to the ones that we have? Or do we have the documentation in place?
Yeah.
And then from there, you can start moving into the more advanced detection techniques, right? On-host monitoring. Very similar to the data center, right? I want to detect backdoors might look a little differently in the cloud, but most likely, a lot of the host-based monitoring stays the same. I think the biggest difference is potentially instance size, how much memory you can consume, performance.
Yeah.
Do you have coverage, right? Before it was, I need to deploy my application. You give it to the person that goes and deploys applications. They can check all the boxes.
Yeah.
Now any developer can deploy applications. And you really have to mature everything alongside as you mature in detection.
I love the analogy of the level 100, 200, 300 as well. In the beginning, is it too early to be doing threat hunting? Because a lot of people get excited about threat hunting. And perhaps some of the CSPMs and guard duties rules are to be blamed for it because you get a lot of defaults. Once you clear that, to your point, select all and suppress.
Right.
And go, I guess I've got to clear everything. They feel that they're ready for threat hunting in the cloud space. Have you guys had to, or have you had some experience working on the threat hunting side? Is it too early to think about it from day one? Or should they build that practice as they grow that capability?
But I would say too early to have a threat hunting team.
Yeah,
right?
okay,
but
yeah.
Not too early to be flexing that muscle, right? If you think about when you detect something that actually turns out to be malicious, what do you go do? You have to go hunt and ensure in the investigation, you need to go make sure that what all did they do?
Yeah.
Right? And so if you're not flexing that muscle from time to time, when it comes time to searching through logs to understand what happened, maybe it takes you too long. Maybe the threat actor is still inside. And if you had flexed that muscle, you could have eradicated it or kicked them out of the environment faster.
Yeah.
Or when you see other companies being breached and they're publishing IOCs, use those IOCs and just double check. Even if you don't think and you're the most confident engineer or security person, you'd be a fool to not just go run that IP across your logs.
Yeah.
And cross your fingers. Right?
Yeah.
And so that's flexing that muscle.
Yeah.
Right. And then I think it's up to you on how you want to prioritize time and skill set, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
But also I think there's an element of hunting when you're building out the detection, especially if it's a brand new log. Understanding the log and what means what is the hunting.
Or even new service as well. I'm sure there'll be plenty of services being announced at reInvent and other places as well.
Yep.
Even if it's new service, that everything is new about it.
Yeah, we talked about it pre-show. Understanding the log before you can actually build a detection on it, right? And that's where a lot of teams lean on vendors.
Yeah, fair.
You go be the expert. You go understand how this works. Or in a lot of cases, guard duty, AWS, they're the experts or should be, right?
Yeah.
And so, I think that all points back to an element of threat hunting.
Yeah.
Versus just looking specifically, your sole job is just to go troll through logs and figure out if something looks bad, right? Because you're going to miss something. And that's where you've got to figure out, understand the logs. What is normal?
Yeah.
What is good? And what are the things that are bad, right? And I think the way I typically like to approach it is, let me look at the application. Here's how a user normally uses it. How would I abuse that? And that's what I loved about, and then I think why I've stayed on the blue team side so long is using that red team mentality on the detection makes you very dangerous. Because you're you're thinking, how would I move if I were to break in?
Yeah.
If I was going to break in the studio today, how would I have come and done that?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then that leads you to know, where should I start looking to see, is there a log source? There's a log source. Is there a log or an audit event in that source that tells me that I opened the front door?
Yeah.
Right. Or I typed the alarm code wrong the first time. Right.
I guess, would you say, I love the threat hunting piece. These days, another thing that's common is multi-cloud as well. Mm-hmm. There's hybrid cloud as well. And I'm sure there's multi-hybrid, whatever the next acronym would be.
Yeah.
Do these things scale across other cloud providers? Because to your point, the larger the organization, the likelihood you're in multiple clouds these days. It's almost unheard that you are a large enterprise and don't have multi-cloud. You probably have some of the clouds that people don't even hear about in the background somewhere as well.
Yeah.
So do these practices of people building capabilities and some of the things you called out about starting with the process and everything, does that still apply across from that? Doesn't matter which new cloud comes in tomorrow?
Yeah, I think it does and it doesn't, right? And I think ideally there's similar log sources in the other cloud providers that are popping up. Ideally, the content within the log source is the same.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's the biggest discrepancy, right? Is an IP logged or not?
Yeah.
Right? Is the identity, can I actually trace it well? do I know how to trace the assume role to this to that, right?
Yeah.
And I think that ties back to threat hunting as well, as like when you have to learn how these logs work.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, it's an event thing now.
Yeah.
Not just a log thing. You got to hunt through the logs and see, can I do this thing if I actually wanted? But when you think about like multi-cloud or hybrid, once again, log sources may be different. The SLAs around them might be different.
Yeah.
And then content of said log might be different, right? I think when I was presenting at BlackHat in 2018, one of the things I really wanted to do was understand what all was logged in CloudTrail. There's no one source that tells you. And so I wrote a tool called Trailblazer.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
I tried to, using Python, execute every API call to see what was actually logged. I learned a lot about what was logged from that standpoint. The list that I knew about grew much larger, but I also found out a lot of things. Some services don't log things unless you made a valid request. And so it still doesn't get you everything.
Yeah.
It was a question of, I don't know if I can detect this or not. And that's where someone goes and tries it. You go look at the logs and say, can I even see what this is? And that's how it works. And so when you go from AWS to Azure to GCP, it's the same thing. Turn on all the logs you can that you want. Go try the things that you think you want to detect.
Yeah.
See if you can detect them, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
There were early on log sources that don't have IPs, right? I think they now do. I'm not going to mention what providers, right?
Yeah.
I think when talking about driving down time to detection, there's a lot of services out there that don't give you login events for up to an hour later.
So, yeah.
If you're tracking down a stolen credential, like once again, an hour might be too late.
Too late, yeah. And I think it's a good segue into some of the BlackHat training that you and Rich run as well. I think definitely, I'll put a link for it as well, because I think it's worthwhile calling about. You guys have pivoted slightly in terms of what it used to be and what it is now. And to kind of set the scene for people, a lot of the organizations these days who have been in the cloud for some time, building cloud security capabilities. Initially, cloud security engineers were looking at the logs and everything. And obviously now we're talking about SOC people looking at the logs, which is the next transition that's happening, where even in the training that we do and you guys are doing, we're both seeing this, that it's happening where the cloud logs are being sent more to the SOC people. What was the training before and where are you taking the training now? Maybe we'll just go there. Where are you guys taking the training now?
Yeah, real quick, the training before was really trying to get that hands-on experience for folks that have never done it in the cloud, right?
Yeah.
So teaching them what are the sources, what kind of attacks exist, and what do they actually look like, right? So what we found both through that as well as experience at HashiCorp and talking to other security professionals is you might have folks that come with some detection experience. They're used to doing it in whatever platform they had before.
Yeah.
You know, be it Splunk, be it Sumo, be it Elastic, be it just native Athena.
Yeah.
Right? But when it goes beyond and scaling and detecting, you want them to go build something or transform a log. What I'm finding is not everyone actually has the hands-on experience to build in the cloud, right? And so we're pivoting it slightly or trying to. We'll see if it gets accepted, right? Is let's teach people what does a log pipeline and detection pipeline look like.
Yeah.
So still actually getting into the incident response and detection perspective. Let's walk them through setting it up. And so to your point earlier is like, where do you start? So you know, that's where we're starting as well. Is you're starting with nothing.
Yeah.
Let's turn on CloudTrail.
Yeah.
Let's centralize it to an S3 bucket.
Yep.
Let's look at that. Let's look at what a simple detection would look like. How long did it take to detect? Okay, now let's hook it up to CloudWatch events and our event bridge, and let's see, can we detect it faster? And then now what do we do once we detect it? Is there some automation that we can do to like auto close down the S3 bucket as an example? Do I just run a run book? How do we do the analysis? And so we're really going back to, in our previous training, folks came and the environment was set up. We're launching attacks. We're teaching them how does SSRF work? What does brute force SSH look like? How does it work with GuardDuty and Security Hub? And now we're just taking you back to square zero.
Yeah.
Day one, you've got nothing. Let's
Yeah.
turn on some logs and let's start analyzing it, right? And we're going to show also, primarily we're going to focus on AWS, but we're going to have Azure components in there as well.
Yeah.
But hands-on primarily likely will be mostly AWS with some Azure. And then at some point we'll probably branch into GCP. But yeah, we're trying to keep it today to a 2-day course.
Yeah, fair.
And not just necessarily go to 4 from the beginning. Right?
Yeah, fair.
But yeah, so that's what we're saying is folks are lacking the experience or understanding of how does the plumbing behind the scenes work? And if I were to need to go modify or create more plumbing, where do I even start? And so that's the experience that we're hoping to give people that go through this course.
It kind of ties in well to what you were saying earlier for threat detection when people are starting off as well. Over time, whether it's through the plethora of SIEM solutions we've had, a lot of people have had the luxury to already get a lot of detection by default. And people may assume they have covered everything with that because I already have 10,000 detections. Why do I need 20 more? Whatever these are talking about, ooh, I need more S3 bucket. I feel it's worthwhile calling out, and I don't know if you agree with me on this, but those defaults are for majority of things they have seen across other customers. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's for the applications you host in your own organization. You may have compliance requirements for whatever industry you're in. You may have services that they have, it's not popular, but somehow are popular in your industry that may not even log into CloudTrail. And you don't have no idea because you didn't listen to the episode and ask, did this thing that Will said, is it even logging? Is that the check? Like, how do I find out if this thing is running in the first place? I don't know. Do you find that there is a bit of a gap in there as well? And that's why it's important for people to understand how to build something and maybe get their hands dirty in the cloud as well?
Yeah, I think so, because you can go buy detections, right? And bring something in.
Yeah.
The problem with that is it's missing the context of how your environment works. What do you allow? What don't you allow?
Yeah.
What's a standard pattern, right? And so that's where I think getting your hands down and dirty and getting into the logs, figuring out how that all works, helps you understand how can you tweak a detection that you built or a bot or you get for free with whatever platform you bought. How do you enrich it? What's the next step? But I think also it's the same thing from when I talked about the red team mentality. With hands-on building and understanding kind of the plumbing behind, it helps you actually understand how developers are deploying infrastructure, how things actually work. And I think it gets you closer to that so that when you are looking at the log source or the logs for detections or responding to them, you can think back, oh yeah, this is what that actually means. Or I understand what assume role actually means now, right? Those kind of things that if all you're doing is responding to things in Splunk or building things out there, you might not actually understand. Right? And I think that's how I've gotten at least to where I am today with my understanding of cloud was early on when I joined that startup back in 2015. I was just clicking in. I was like, oh, an AWS account I can play with. I don't have to pay for. Let me learn. And then from there, it's like I gained an understanding of how cloud worked. Now I want to build detections for it. Let me build those detections. That's the same thing too with, really understand the context of things and not just turning on the hose or, I bought all these detections from this vendor. There's going to be false positives. You're going to have to figure out how to scale yourself as you scale from a cloud perspective. Part of that is understanding what is good and what's bad in your environment.
In some of the training that I was running for SOC people, I came across this question, and I think I'm curious to know your answer. The blurry line between if I see a cloud alert and I may think it's a high or a medium, I still have to reach out to the application team to figure out, hey, is this a high or a medium? Because I have no context for this. But the idea of tinkering around in a cloud environment is sometimes foreign, because it almost is mistaken for, I'm expecting a XSS, I'm expecting a SQL injection. But if you put your eyes across what happens in cloud, it's usually misconfiguration, which can lead to a vulnerability. So the question then becomes, wait, so am I not looking at security alerts? I'm looking at misconfiguration alerts. Isn't that a developer's job? I struggle to answer that sometimes because I'm like, no, it can lead to, but have you come across that challenge as well in your?
Yeah, definitely. If you think back to what's the source of a detection? Is it a leaked credential? Is it a misconfiguration to your point? They had to have gotten in somehow. Right? And I think the biggest thing with burnout is too many alerts. The biggest thing with burnout and animosity is, to your point, isn't that a developer's job, right? If the security team is always responding to a misconfiguration that they believe the application team should have not done, you're going to get some headbutting and things, right? It's how do you solve that? Do you even understand what that alert means or the application logs, right? And that's where you're going to be working with the different teams regardless. But yeah, I can totally see, and to your point, misconfiguration is how it happened, right? Unless it's the leaked secrets, phishing, vulnerability would be the only other thing I could think of that's not misconfiguration. That,
and most
could lead to things. But a lot of what we're seeing, especially in like what we call our sandbox environment, where we allow users to play and discover, is, let me just deploy this database. Postgres, let me just go, username, password, Postgres, and here we go, right?
Actually, because you mentioned secret detection as well, would you say, in terms of examples of what's a good place to start building detection for capability, what are your thoughts on using secret detection as like a starting point for those kind of things, especially in a cloud native world? Perhaps you guys are using it as well.
It's a great place to start, I think. I think it's a good place to start flexing that threat hunting, if you will, from a maturity of your security program, maturity of your SDLC program, secrets management program. If you think about, I've loved what AWS has done, and I hope other cloud providers listening follow suit, is when a credential now is leaked in GitHub publicly, if it's an AWS credential, they tell AWS nukes it.
Oh, okay.
They put that policy on it that says this doesn't work anymore. And it's for the customer's protection, right?
That's right.
If you remember back in the day, it was lots of crypto mining, right? And nowadays, it's lots of crypto mining that lead to very large bills that customers are going to get stuck paying or, paying at the end of the day, right? I think AWS might be forgiving the first time, but when it happens the second and third, what do? I forget the stats, but at one point, the crypto mining folks that are listening to the public event stream are faster than a lot of the other tools sometimes.
Oh,
right?
wow.
Crazy to think about. Like, I think it's within seconds or like.
Oh, wow. So it's not half an hour anymore. Like,
I don't think it's within half an hour that these like crypto miners can pick up things. I think it's something like on the order of 30 seconds or something.
Oh my God. So they're scanning all public repositories.
Yeah. So GitHub now has a public event stream.
Oh,
and so
wow.
for every commit, they're just running looking for this certain kind of secret. Right?
Oh my God.
And so luckily, like with GitHub, I don't know how GitLab or others do it. They've got the token scanning project, which HashiCorp we're part of as well. So
okay, nice.
Anytime a Terraform Cloud token or HCP Terraform token gets leaked, we're notified and we remediate. Similar to how AWS gets notified with credentials. And then they remediate.
Okay.
Which I think is super cool. But there's all the other credentials that exist. And it's not... Developers may be doing it on purpose because there's not a better solution. They need to put their secret somewhere. There could be, oops, I didn't realize that when I did a git add all or a git add dot, that it actually added these files that had all my secrets in it. And then you push it up not knowing. But you might have secrets out there that could be problematic if someone happened on them publicly. Or you might not think it's a problem because everything is a private repo or internal repo. But what happens if someone gets access to the GitHub, right? What happens if someone deploys a misconfigured box? It has GitHub credentials on it. And all of a sudden now they can see your source code. I think detecting secrets to your original question is a great place to start.
Because I guess these days you're probably using some kind of secret manager, like a HashiCorp Vault or something. What are some of the components that people may interact with? Because I guess you guys have Vault, Boundary, and a few others for security lifecycle.
Like detecting secrets, since you brought it up. HashiCorp Vault Radar is our solution where we're trying to detect secrets in source code initially and branching out to other things, Slack, Jira, wherever else you might paste things that you don't want. Really tying that back, if you think about how do we do better from that if we have a problem. Is our Vault product is allowing you to store those secrets securely and push those out into the environments that you want them to be in or allow those applications to query into Vault and read them. And then Boundaries are our solution for really giving you that secure access to manage targets. So SSH without having to fumble certs, remote RDP, things like that.
Because I guess Vault is open source, it's very popular as well. The reason I bring the secret management part is only because I feel sometimes it could be overwhelming to look at the threat detection space and look at the 10,000 alerts that come in, which place to start. I think I personally found secret scanning was like the easier one. But I also feel for people who are starting off in this career as well. I think we were talking about this briefly earlier. For anyone who's starting today and want to get into cloud, detection response, probably, I think I'll probably let you add the flavor on it. How do you see the market of talent that's coming into the space?
I think there's a ton of interest, which I think is great because you always see the stats of we need this many security people. And then you're like, why aren't people hiring? Right. And I think first and foremost, that's a problem, right? With the economy and market and things. But secondly, you've got folks that are switching careers, just getting out of school. Maybe they don't know what they want. And so they need to go find or ask people, how did you get into security? Maybe go read a book or something and see how other people got into security. And I find that a lot of people think, and rightly so, and a lot of companies are willing to give or bet on someone with no experience as a SOC analyst. As someone that can come in and field those alerts, gain some experience, decide if that's an area they want to stay or then pivot.
Yeah.
And so I know a couple of people that are still looking, unfortunately, for jobs.
Yeah.
And those are the kind of things that I'm leading them to is, hey, maybe go look here and see if that's something you like.
Is that a space where you say where you don't, is the bar lower to get into a SOC analyst for cloud detection response role?
I don't know if the bar is lower.
And I don't mean in the context of not lack of knowledge, but more in the context of that if I don't have a lot of experience on-premise, but I've been working on, I don't know, cloud security projects, building detection, putting it in a GitHub repository, build a project portfolio, I don't know, have a few Medium articles on it or whatever. For getting into the cloud space specifically, if it's a cloud-first kind of company, I imagine would the bar be low for that in terms of, I don't have to prove 18 years of experience in on-premise detection response because it's a cloud-first world we are moving in. And I've done a lot of work in cloud where I can prove to people that have done this. I meant more bar is lower in that context where I don't have to prove my 18 years of history in on-premise before I go into apply for a job in cloud.
I think so. And I think folks can go self-study and get some of the basic certifications, which prove they have some knowledge.
Yeah.
And that might be enough to get them that first, or the foot in the door.
Yeah.
And then from there, mature, soak up knowledge from other people, pivot into other areas.
Yeah.
You know, when I started out, it was like code security because I came from a software background.
Yeah.
And then it became penetration testing because it was, how can I think about how you write an API and how I can abuse it?
Yeah.
And it just snowballed from there into detection and now building out security teams and things, right?
Yeah.
And I could see that with cloud, especially with all the public resources and training, like when you and I came up, is like, where do we go learn? Right?
That's right.
IRC, who's going to teach me? I'll teach you to hack. I want to learn how to defend, right?
Yeah, that's right.
But now all the different resources online.
Yeah, there's a lot more.
Events
like this. Even BlackHat, I think, still does scholarships for students and things as well.
Yeah,
as a student,
does it as well. Yeah.
You know, ShmooCon does it as well. Are really helping people network, get that experience. But to your point, no longer do you have to be like, I was managing network security for 15 years in order to just get in the door over here.
Yeah, fair.
Which I think is good.
Yeah, but I think I don't want to undermine the fact that you still need to understand the fundamentals, though. You still need to understand how network works and VPC and all of that as well. That doesn't go away. It's just that you don't have to sit there and go into a data center and figure out which plug to what firewall is which Netgear firewall or whatever. I remember that these used to be like a whole CCNA certification used to be so popular at a point that if you have a CCNA certification, you're definitely getting a job kind of a thing. Because I came from a more infra kind of background.
Right.
And in that space, there was a Microsoft certified service professional or something, MCSP. Used to be very popular. CCNA was popular, but not.
I remember back going through school, I wanted to go get my Cisco cert so I could at least prove that I had some knowledge of networking, right, or something.
I mean, I'm sure there's value in there as well. So it's not that everyone's on cloud. It's just that if you are specifically thinking of working in the cloud space, the bar could be lower depending on who you talk to. But as long as you're proving that you know what you're talking about, whether it's through public projects and other things as well. But one thing that I've been talking a lot more recently about is that when you and I started, the number of services were not that many. So we had a lot more without feeling overwhelmed. It was new technology, so it was a bit more overwhelming. But it wasn't that I had 400 services to look at. And figure out which one of these 400 you wanted to figure out detection for or response for. Do you find that the bar may be lower to get in, but the bar to be an expert is higher now?
No, definitely. Yeah. I think it's, to your point, I don't even know how many services there are in it. A ton, right? And no one's going to be an expert, right? You might be an expert in one area. You might have a broad knowledge across the board. Back to what we started with, like, on-prem to cloud, some of those skill sets transfer when it comes to like host-based monitoring and those kind of things. But when it comes to cloud detection, it's all brand new to everyone. And every cloud security engineer dreads the product launch, right? Because it's once again tying it back to looking at the log, understanding it. It's looking at the service, understanding what could go wrong. That translates into the things that you might want to detect.
Right? Oh my God, yes.
And I think back to your like barrier of entry, the one thing I love about like detection and SOC and things like that is you don't necessarily have to know everything to get in. You're going to reach out to the experts anyway when a problem happens. Or maybe you're mature enough that you have really good run books that when you see this, do this. Or when you see this, these are how you tell if it's false positive or not. And if it's not a false positive or you don't know, escalate it to that next tier. When you do that, maybe you can go look over their shoulder while they're doing it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But yeah, service launch is all like, we used to dread that day. At Netflix,
yeah.
Right?
I'm pretty sure people still do.
Yeah,
I'm sure people walking away from.
I'm pretty sure there were some Amazon Q announcements this week. And,
yeah. They had a few services.
AI in the cloud. Like,
yeah.
What does that even mean?
I think networking has changed quite a bit as well. I think some of the conversations I was having about earlier to what we were saying, people started in the beginning, one VPC for test, one VPC for prod.
Yeah.
Now the idea is there's a central account for hosting your one VPC that you extend the subnet to multiple accounts.
Shared subnets across accounts,
it's not even physically there. I'm like, what is this world? It's not even physically there anymore, but somehow it appears in your network. And I think I'm curious also from a perspective of how would detection change in that context as well when it's just an object and you're trying to figure out where is this object in the large cloud footprint that I have, but then is that going to be rich enough information that both me and an attacker can figure out really quickly? Oh, there's more here. It's not just this. Because earlier, in a way, security through obscurity, this is the only VPC. I guess they don't have any more accounts.
Yeah.
But now I know there are more accounts because I see there's a resource that is from another account. So now I know where I need to pivot. I know what account number should I be trying. I'm gonna stop ranting, but it has changed quite a bit.
I mean, I think it ties back to do you have the list of all your accounts?
Yeah.
And now do you have a list of all your resources? Because to your point, that resource might actually be from a different account.
Yeah.
And so it really speaks to asset inventory.
Yeah.
And then you think about what if you do have an attacker on the inside? Do they have access to that asset inventory? So you then bridge into identity problems and all of things, right?
Yeah,
we were talking about identity access management before as well.
Yeah.
But it's all just coming together. And I would say the one good thing is as cloud is evolving and companies are really embracing it and going both feet in, it's forcing everyone to mature alongside. Right?
Yeah.
And if you're not maturing and if you're not prioritizing, you're going to be left behind and you're going to be the next one on the SEC
committee announcing yourself as we made a boo. Those are most of the questions. I've got 3 fun questions. I think we had them the last time you were here, so I wonder if the answers have changed. First one being, what do you spend your time on when you're not working on threat detection of the world?
So professionally, Rich and I spend a lot of time figuring out what trainings can we do. One of the things I didn't mention that we always try to do is if a student left our class, would we hire them? And that's our bare bar is we want people to walk away with the skill set where they would be someone we'd consider. And so spend a ton of time thinking about that. I've got some side projects going on with some ex-colleagues that I've worked with just toying with business ideas that maybe one day.
Yeah.
My wife and I are building a house, and so that's taking up all my time.
Oh, wait, actually,
outside.
Are you involved in building the roof?
Oh, no, we're not building it.
Yeah, I'm like, wow. That is a big project.
We're designing a house and having a builder build it.
Oh, yeah, fair. Okay, yeah.
We've been in that process for 10 months now.
Oh, wow, okay.
Nearing the end, but that's taken up a ton of my time. And then, I'm still, can't remember if last time I was as into bourbon as I am now, but big avid connoisseur and collector of bourbons. Usually if you find me at these conferences, I'm like, hey, let's go find a bourbon that we like.
Yeah, that's right.
Which I think is, I don't know if it's unfortunate or fortunate that it seems to be something tied with security industry is people like bourbon.
Yeah.
So it's been great.
Coffee and bourbon.
To network and share memories over a glass of bourbon with folks. But that's where I spend a ton of my time, right? And
perfect.
I think since last time I was on, I got married and my priorities outside of work have changed a lot, right?
Fair.
I used to, after work, switch my side project and just do that every day. Now it's after work. I need to go in, see the family. I've got 2 puppies now. I guess they're still puppies. They're
fair.
about 2 years old.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So life is different.
If the 2 dogs, you're definitely busier than normal as well. Second question, what is something that you're proud of that is not on your social media?
I'm proud of my wife, first and foremost.
Yeah, there you go. I'll send that reminder.
She would never watch it. With 404, she's never watched an episode.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And she's, you're welcome. I think back to my career. I don't know if you ever do this. I do what ifs a lot.
I do this.
What if I would have married that girl? What if I would have taken that job?
Yeah.
What if, right? And I reflect back on that quite frequently. And so I'm quite proud that even in switches that I've had, that I've always landed well. I've learned and tried to make the most out of any situation. And I got some advice back early days when I was working at Raytheon was taking a step sideways or even backwards isn't setting you back from a career perspective. And I've tried to think about that as I make different moves. And And so I've been quite happy with my what if. I think I've made the right decisions.
Yeah.
Haven't regretted any of them one bit.
Yeah.
And I'm proud to, I know you said what's not on your LinkedIn, but I'm proud of where I've gotten to.
Yeah.
I'm proud of who I've become as a human, proud that I'm building a family.
Yeah.
And then most importantly, proud of my career as well.
Would you say it's also following your gut as well? Because to what you said, you started in software development, then you switched over to pen testing, which kind of seems like a natural transition, but then you switch to detection, which is like, I don't know, you go out, because a lot of traditional paths might have been go to manager level then there, but you do take side steps, but you followed your gut for what felt right at that point in time. And so definitely
followed my gut, found the things that I liked.
Yeah.
Took advantage of opportunities given to me.
Yeah.
Advice I'd give listeners is if someone offers to collaborate or to go grab a coffee or a bourbon, take them up on it.
Yeah.
If Ashish ever asks you to come be on the podcast, figure out how to make it work.
That's right. Even if it means finding out 1 hour before your flight leaves. I love that because I relate to your point about my what ifs have been more around seasons, I feel is how I describe it. It's like what feels positive right now, what's making me happy, and it could be different. Like I think different things for different people, and people can reflect back. I reflect back on the concept of what I'm doing right now doesn't make me happy. If it doesn't, then I need to change something, I think. And the same vein as you are thinking as well. Man, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Third one, which is final question. Favorite cuisine or restaurant used to be the question. Now we've switched it over to if you're stuck in an island and you can only get one dish or a cuisine. What would that be? Can be from any restaurant, by the way, that dish.
So I love Italian food.
Oh, nice.
The cuisine would be Italian. We spent our honeymoon in Italy.
Oh, nice.
I love it. It would be that, and it'd probably be like tagliatelle ragu or a lasagna or something. I would have to, the island would need to be big, and I'd have to do a lot of exercise. But otherwise, I'd be as big as this table. But yeah, that would probably be it. That or I always say, I can't survive without chicken.
Oh, yeah. So, you definitally need some chicken in
your life. I need some chicken in my life.
Fair. So. That's awesome. No, thank you for sharing that. For people who are wanting to get in touch with you, to talk more about threat detection response, where can people find you on the internet? Where can they connect with you?
I'm on LinkedIn. I think it's William-Bengtson.
I'll put the link.
Or, I'm still on X.
Oh, no.
I just downloaded Blue Sky the other day.
Oh, nice.
So
okay, fair.
I'm just slow to the whole thing. It's more just like, I didn't want to have to manage it. So I'm slowly transitioning over. I'm glad I don't know, is Mastodon still there?
Yeah, apparently, I think it is.
But I'm glad I've missed that boat because it seems to be everyone's going to Blue Sky now.
Yeah. So, that seems to be the hardest thing at the moment, yes.
Yeah, and I'm still online, but LinkedIn's probably the best place to reach me.
I will leave the link as well.
I'd say if you connect, send me a message and let me know.
Yeah.
Because I get so many connections these days and I can't tell.
Yeah,
the thing that bugs me the most about LinkedIn is the business development people that put in their header as if they're actually nice.
I help cloud security. And you're like,
solving secrets management, whatever. And I'm like, oh, cool. And then I look and I'm like, oh, you want to sell me something. Yeah, send me a message and let me know you don't want to sell me something. You just want to chat. I would leave the links in the show note for LinkedIn. Thank you so much for coming in. Thanks for having me. This has been awesome. Thank you so much for listening and watching this episode of Cloud Security Podcast. If you've been enjoying content like this, you can find more episodes like these on www.cloudsecuritypodcast.tv. We are also publishing these episodes on social media as well, so you can definitely find these episodes there. Oh, by the way, just in case there was interest in learning about AI cybersecurity, we also have a sister podcast called AI Cybersecurity Podcast, which may be of interest as well. I'll leave the links in the description for you to check them out. And also for our weekly newsletter, where we do in-depth analysis of different topics within cloud security, ranging from identity, endpoint, all the way up to what is the CNAP or whatever a new acronym that comes out tomorrow. Thank you so much for supporting, listening, and watching. I'll see you next time.